Welcome to the ParentNet podcast by Focus on the Family Singapore. In each episode, we will be speaking with everyday parents and practitioners as they share with us gems from their parenthood journey. Keep tuning in to learn with us as we figure it out together.
Hello and welcome to the ParentNet podcast. My name is EJ and I am your host for this episode. If you are new to us, do subscribe to our ParentNet podcast on your podcast platform. We believe you'll discover interesting topics and helpful conversations. So in today's episode, we're asking the question, can art help children regulate their emotions? Engaging in creative activities can provide children with powerful tools to express their feelings, manage stress, and develop resilience. But how can the everyday parent, like us here, help our kids learn such skills? To help shed some light on this topic, I'm excited to welcome Christine to our podcast studio. Christine is a certified art therapist and she works with children and teens in regulating and managing their emotions. So Christine, welcome to the ParentNet podcast.
Thank you, EJ.
It's so good to have you here with us. So as we kick off this episode, could I get you to start by telling us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Let's put it this way. I will introduce how and why I became an art therapist, which is what I'm doing now. Even when I was a teenager, I just have a soft spot for kids. And for 25 years, I've been in early childhood education, helping very young children from 18 months to 6 years old and supporting their parents. So in my 20 years as being a principal, I actually counsel many children and their parents. So when the teachers find that the children has challenging behaviors, they will send them to the principal office, and then that's when I'll be spending a lot of time talking to kids, understanding why they're behaving in the way that they did. Along with that, I will have to also find myself counseling parents, helping them to manage their children at home. The other thing that led me to become an art therapist is my personal passion for art making. So from a very young age, I just enjoy making art, spend a lot of time making all kinds of art. And with this passion for art and also my passion in helping children and parents, especially helping children with expressing the emotions that they are not able to verbally, I pursued my master's in art therapy. And then for 15 years now, I've been in private practice as an art therapist, helping people who go through crisis. My youngest client was 2 years old, that young, yes, and the oldest is someone in the 70s. As a private practitioner, I actually help people with different age and from different backgrounds who are challenged with different difficulties in life through what we call art psychotherapy. And besides this, I actually advocate healthy mental health practices. So what I do is I conduct workshops in schools, companies, churches. I run enrichment programs in some preschools to provide a space for children to express and explore their emotions in a safe way.
Wow, that's really rich experience from Christine on the professional front line and also a personal passion in this area of art making and venturing into art therapy. So today, as we talk about art therapy, let's start off with this. I don't assume everyone knows fully what art therapy is. So Christine, could you help shed some insight, share a little bit about what art therapy really is?
I would like to always introduce art therapy simply with the two words, art and therapy. So I think when we talk about art in art therapy, we are referring to visual art only, meaning painting, drawing, sculpturing, collage, any kind of visual art activities. And therapy, of course, we all know that all therapies actually help people feel better or get better. So art therapy is actually a mental health profession that uses the art process to improve the mental and emotional well-being.
Sounds very professional in the term. And as a counselor myself, I've always heard about art therapy from a very professional standpoint as well. And I think today the purpose of our podcast here is also to better understand how can we bring art therapy or elements of art therapy on the home front where an everyday parent can use it purposefully to help our children in terms of emotional regulation. So question for you, Christine, how can parents support or better support their children's emotional development through art at home?
With the nature of art, anybody is able to engage in just making art and feeling distressed, feeling relieved. Firstly, by providing a physical space that supports the use of art materials to express those emotions and to regulate them will be a good way to start. So this can be done at home. Just find a designated space, like a more quiet, maybe a quiet corner, whereby parents, you and your child are able to come together and set up this space, because when a child is involved in the setting up, there'll be a sense of ownership. And in that space, together you can set up with an array of art materials, for your child to express his or her feelings and thoughts in a non-verbal manner. So I think when we talk about art materials, it's such a wide range. It can be from basic drawing mediums like markers, crayons, colored pencils, all those things that we are familiar with, pencils, erasers, right? And different kinds of papers to draw on, to paint on, to make collage, or even papers for them to tear. You can be creative, go to a bookstore and get things like crepe paper, construction paper, stuff like that. And of course, you can provide wet mediums. Wet mediums are able to provide a different kind of experience. So we are talking about things like paint, and there are different kinds of paint. So it could be watercolor paint or acrylic paint, gouache, tempera paint. They all have different textures, but you may want to be very careful with acrylic because when they stain, it's hard to remove. The other thing you can think of is like clay. So there's a very convenient medium, which is called air dry clay, whereby it doesn't require firing. It's just molding, and then you leave it in the air, it will dry by itself. So those are fun for children who are very tactile. So I think providing a physical space is a good way to start with. But I would like to highlight something very important, which is providing a consistent psychological safe space. So you can have a very safe physical space, but psychological safety is as important as physical safety. When a child can be very free to be himself or herself around you within safe boundaries, that is psychological safety. So, of course, when we talk about safe boundaries, we are talking about the do's and don'ts, the expectations that you may have conveyed to your child during your training. Those are necessary because then your child would feel safe knowing what he or she is not allowed to do. But within that physical and psychological safe space, your child doesn't need to feel like, when mommy and daddy are around, they need to behave in a very controlled way, but they can just be free to be authentic in their own skin. So this will be a very ideal space whereby your child can feel psychologically safe, being able to be free to be himself or herself, and exploring with those art materials, helping them to express their feelings and regulate them if necessary.
I echo what Christine started this podcast with. When it comes to the word art therapy, there's the art aspect and there's the therapy aspect. And I think Christine has rightly pointed it out, talking about the art aspect where you have a space at home where you have the supplies that the children need and all different kind of materials. But more importantly, as we talk about the therapy part of it, it is providing that psychological safety, a place where they can be free. I borrow Christine's word, be free to express their thoughts, their emotions on the drawings or the paintings or the mediums that we have given to them. As Christine was sharing this, I can't help but rethink all the parenting moments when I brought up my boy. We used to allow him to have that space at home to be free to draw. I had to caution myself so much to make that a safe space, like what Christine has mentioned, because I find myself often trying to jump in and say, "Ayo, don't draw like this, you can draw better, you should draw the face like that, I'm trying to control him." And I realize as I hear back from what Christine said, it ends up that the child might not be free to express how he or she feels or thinks. They are probably just drawing what we want them to draw in the end. So I think it's a really thoughtful reminder from Christine today as we listen in. Now, Christine, I want to ask you a little bit more. So you've shared about how art and therapy works together for a parent at home.
Can I just go back there on what you just said, EJ, about your own personal experience with your child in the past? I think it's also important for me to highlight or to recommend that the psychological safe space can be created and maintained in such a way that is non-judgmental. whereby there's no right and wrong, there's no good or bad art. You were mentioning about like it's very hard to control yourself to say, hey, you should draw it this way and all that. So basically it's having the idea that art in the first place has no right and wrong, and there's no like nice looking or not. It's to drop your expectation as a parent and allow the child to freely express in a way that he or she knows that he or she will not be corrected, will not be reprimanded actually, or to be put down in any way. I think it's important. Sometimes parents can be very curious. When you see your child drawing something, you just cannot control yourself but to ask, what are you drawing, I think that it's important to give that space and not to interrupt prematurely. But if you are really curious, I can understand that. I think firstly, validation is important, to validate what your child is doing and not so much about praising the nice drawing, because it's not about how well it's drawn, but rather the story behind it. So it's to validate your child's feelings. And also, if you really cannot control yourself and have to ask some questions, I think it's important to limit that and to ask open-ended questions rather than giving very guiding or leading answers that you will love to hear. And the other thing is we want to prevent discipline from happening within that safe space. One helpful way is to actually set boundaries with your child before you even allow the space to be used. So that can actually prevent your child from doing things that are not appropriate within that space and getting reprimanded in that safe space whereby it's meant for he or she to be freely expressing. It could be things like you can draw anything or paint anything you like, but not on the wall, things like that. Or like you can mess up, but please clear up before you leave the space.
So it's important before we begin the whole art process, setting the boundaries, agreement with the child first.
Yes.
And then when they get started, as Christine has mentioned, allowing them that freedom, dropping parents our own expectations on that. You brought up a very insightful point. You mentioned something about the story behind the drawing. I thought that was really powerful because as we allow the child to have the freedom, we need to be inquisitive appropriately at the right time to find out what is the story behind whatever they are drawing. So could you share with us, in your experience all these years helping children, teenagers through art therapy, has there been any examples of how you have helped a child regulate or better regulate their emotions, better understanding their story behind the drawings or the pictures?
Maybe I can share what went on with my youngest client so far. So the 2-year-old client, she's now grown up, but when she was 2 years old, the mother was very concerned, mainly because as a 2-year-old, a toddler, it's common for toddlers to bite their peers when they are angry or upset or stressed. But this 2-year-old, she bites herself until it bleeds sometimes, and can happen quite often when she's stressed or angry or upset or frustrated. And she doesn't verbalize her feelings. So that's the main concern that the mom had, and therefore she sent her for art therapy with me. I just quote the first artwork that she has made. So as a 2-year-old, most of the time you can't really recognize what they're drawing or painting. It's mainly abstract to us. And she was using paint with paintbrushes, just creating blobs of paint. And she just went over and over the same spot on the paper until the paper tore. So you can tell from her process of painting that there was so much exertion in using the paintbrush with the paint, and that there's this repetitive around the same spot until the paper tore. As an art therapist, I could see a lot of underlying negative emotions that was being released through that process. This is just one example, and by releasing those emotions, sometimes it can lead to artistic sublimation, and what it really means is that when the child has released this negative emotion or this difficult emotions onto the art process using the art mediums, it can actually reduce or eliminate the urges to act out in a asocial or unhelpful manner. So for this child, it's not a one session, it's a series of sessions. After the 12 sessions with me, actually, even after she started art therapy, she actually stopped biting herself, because I believe that she has an alternative way to release the emotions that she could not before, and she resort to biting herself to do that. So this is just one example of how art therapy is able to help release emotions that eliminates behaviors that are concerning.
Thank you so much, Christine, for sharing that example. I think it gives encouragement and hope to many of us parents, especially with younger kids. Sometimes we see them venturing into drawing, paintings, or manipulating some of the materials in their own time. Like you said, that may be a way where they are letting out or expressing their emotions as well. And so sometimes as parents, instead of trying to over control them, not being able to, don't do this and don't do that, maybe there is a safe space and a safe boundary where we can allow them to just let it all out. And as I hear from your story, this, even a 2-year-old who may not be so articulate in the words yet, but yet through art is able to better express his or her emotions. Turning the question around to you again, when we talk about art therapy, I often have this, maybe it's a myth or misunderstanding, that to do art therapy for a child, there must be great interest. There must have great, some might say, talent in drawing to be able to express it out. But not every child has that kind of interest for a start, even in art activities, or might be resistant. So maybe you could share with us from your professional point of view, with so many kids and children, teenagers you have helped, how do you handle situations where maybe a child is resistant even to participate in art activities, or maybe just not interested in it?
Honestly, EJ, I don't think I've ever encountered a preschooler resisting art and say, oh, no, I don't want to color, I don't want to make art. It's very unlikely. The children I work with, they're innately curious and they love to explore. But I do encounter some of these children when they're older, like in primary school. So usually the resistance starts a bit later when they are more self-aware and they are more sensitive to comments that they might have received from the people around them. So it could be teachers, could be parents, could be adults around them, or it could be peers. Comments like, what are you drawing? What's that? Or like, it's so messy, it looks so weird, So these comments that they hear could make them feel discouraged and giving them the notion that, hey, I cannot make art. Yeah, so I think this is quite common among adults. So many adults would say that, I cannot make art, I don't know how to draw. This idea actually comes from the environment, like what people have been telling you. So I would say the same thing that I said before, which is art has no right and wrong. It has no good or bad. There's no nice or not nice art. So stay with that. And just to be very mindful that this do not come out in any way in words or even in a facial expression to disapprove. So I think with that belief that art really has no right and wrong, there's no like nice or not nice, and you advocate that, you maintain that in your disposition, I believe that's already very helpful to any child who is willing to pick up a paintbrush or a drawing tool again.
It's a great reminder from Christine again that, often when we see a child who is resistant or not interested in the art activity, there is a certain perception, maybe a certain belief that was incorporated from a young age that art needs to be a certain way, you need to be like a Picasso, you need to draw in a certain fashion. So it has already been defined in a child's mind that art is nice in a certain way. If I don't draw like that, I'm not going to participate, because after that I might get laughed at, I might get critiqued at. It no longer becomes safe space. Yes. However, Christine just reminded us time and again that there's no right or wrong. And I really love this quote that you just brought up in our podcast. There's no right or wrong. The freedom to express it. Someone can draw colorfully and very nice in what the world says, in everyone's definition of beauty, but a child can be drawing stickman or very abstract art, and that's fine because that is how the child may view it as well, right? Would you also say, Christine, that as we give the child that kind of non-judgmental environment, that safe environment, will it grow in them that interest to continue using art as a way of just expressing themselves?
Maybe to respond to this, I just share my own personal experience. The reason why I could be able to be enjoying art so much as a child, not in school, but on my own, in my own time, was because when there's no requirement for any right techniques, when there's no expectation from anyone, there's endless possibilities. Endless, right? So in that moment that I had throughout my childhood, it's just enjoyment, enjoying art. Freely making them without any consciousness of anyone's expectations, how it's going to look to anyone but myself.
So again, for all parents, if you are listening to our Parent podcast right now, as we talk about art therapy, it's important. Let's lay down our expectation or even the social expectation of what is beauty in terms of art, all right? I think beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder, the
That's
child
right.
who is drawing, so as a child freely express, if he draws an animal in a certain way, if he paints the animal in this color, that color, it is fine,
That's right.
just let them be.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, it might be a good time to sit down and hear their thoughts on what they drew, why they drew it a certain way, what were they feeling, and I guess that's whole part of the conversation process, right?
Actually, at this point, maybe I'd like to give an example of this 6-year-old child who was in my enrichment class in childcare. He was making this painting with unusual colors. So like his sky was in a like green, and then his trees were in purple, and then it's just all the different unusual colors that he used. After the first painting he made, he was looking at me with this, oh, am I going to be scolded kind of eye contact. And then when he realized that I was supportive and there's no negative comment, there's no critic, and I was supportive in encouraging him to share about his painting, he just made series of these paintings over sessions. And this is a boy who has been constantly corrected in class, like telling him he shouldn't do this, he shouldn't do that. He's not one who is very good with his academics, so he get a lot of wrongs in class. And then I see that he was so liberated in art therapy sessions just by being allowed to explore and express in creative ways. And for that moment, it's just like a breather. Finally, there's no wrong in this. What I want to say is that in art therapy, the focus is not on aesthetic appearance. The focus is about a personal benefit, like how the artwork is so personal to you. So it could be a child finding a breather from being corrected in all the wrongs that he or she has done. It could be just being curious and wanting to create things that haven't been seen. It could be anything, but the focus is about how it's enriching the child or healing his or her own emotions. It is not about how the artwork turned out to be.
Indeed, it is not how aesthetically nice the art piece is, but the emphasis is on the child, the story, the feelings and the emotions that the child is going through. I feel so heartened as I hear Christine share all this, because it just brought me a reminder about a couple of years back when my son was growing up, and we were probably having quite a tense day, and he went off on his quote-unquote art therapy moment. He was having the free space and to draw, and I still remember that moment he was just plopping paints and stuff on the drawing paper. And when I watched from the side, as my eyes were not honestly on the art piece, I was on the splashes of paint around everywhere, and I was very tempted to really jump in and wanting to, as the typical parent, right? Cleanliness issues and all these things, and curb the whole session per se, the whole time that he has. But I just decided, okay, it's okay. We all need some cooling off period, so I just let him be. And after a few hours, we came back to the drawings and the paintings that he did, and we had a good time conversing over it. And I realized, there was this super red blob that he made. And when we had a chance to talk, I asked him, what does this red blob? He said the red blob is me. Yeah, he said that the daddy is having a very angry day and he made daddy angry because of some things that he did, and he saw that I was angry. And so now I'm looking back as I hear in this conversation with Christine, it's very interesting that the child could also equate that red is angry.
Yes.
And he could relate that observably he saw dad was angry, and this is what he painted down. He had made daddy angry, and now I'm looking back, it's so much refreshed insight even just from this conversation.
Actually, with that
you.
painting of the red blob, your son could have been relieved of stress.
Yeah.
Because of the anger he feels around him.
Yeah.
That could have happened for him, and so that process is so relieving for him.
I'm so glad I didn't jump in to talk about the splashes on the wall, which still exist today in the house. But it's a good reminder. I'm glad, as I sit here and I hear this conversation, that I have kept my calm and maintained that therapeutic moment for him without jumping in. Christine, we talked about so much, and all the ideas and the tips, and parents managing our expectation, giving safe space for the children. Actually, one key thing is required, which is time. We need time to do all these things, and in the busy age, every parent is like busy, struggling with time. We are busy with work, we want time for ourselves. I'm sure you have heard from many parents coming to you as the professional, we can't find time to engage in such thing as art to regulate our children's emotions. Any suggestions you would have for parents who mention such things to you?
I think, in my opinion, I can resonate with the fact that sometimes we are so busy, especially with work, and then we just say we have no time. When something is important, we make time. We cannot find time. We make time. So it's a deliberate effort. For example, when I run a class, when I teach art therapy to a group of adults, and I advocate making art as a self-care activity on their own, the first answer I get is, I have no time. But in class, they have experienced that within 10, 20 minutes, they're able to make a piece of art that could significantly relieve them of some emotions. So when we talk about time, is how much time? I think, in my opinion, it is important to make regular quality time with your child, because that's all they need. Regularity provides security. When some things are done regularly, the child is able to anticipate when it's going to happen, and that provides a very important sense of security for your child. And quality time does not have to be very long as during that time you drop your phone, you drop your other tasks, not just physically but mentally being there, psychologically, emotionally being there for your child within that short amount of time. So it could be 20 minutes per day. It could be 20 minutes per week. I don't know what is possible for you, but I think what I want to emphasize here is regular quality time. And that's really enough for a child.
Truly, regularity gives security.
Yes.
Right? Like what Christine has
right.
mentioned, is really important reminder for all of us as parents here. And you know that if it's something that is important to us, we will literally make time for it. All right.
Right.
I'm sure we can make 15 minutes to watch social media. We can make 15 minutes for our children. All right.
That's
Just
right.
sitting by their side and doing this art time together with them. So Christine, thank you so much for all these wonderful tips you've shared with us. I mean, I myself as the host have benefited a lot, and I never knew art can be so helpful for children in a therapeutic way. And now I feel very encouraged that I did some things that were right in the past, and I will continue to do it, in terms of embracing that art space for my child as a way for him to express himself, and we have conversations about it. So before we wrap up today's episode of ParentNet Podcast, I leave the final thoughts to you to encourage our audience.
I think, firstly, the fact that you parents are tuning into this podcast, there's a likelihood that it means that you love your child. You're already making efforts to be a better parent to your child. Give yourself a pat on the shoulder right now. I think this is great, right, to start with. So I think that every step counts. We all know this saying, there's a will, there's a way. And for me, I believe that there's a heart, there's a way.
When there's a heart, there's a way. All right. Thank you so much, Christine, and to all our listeners. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. Okay, and please give yourself a big pat on the shoulders.
Yeah.
So if you've enjoyed this episode, please do share it with a friend whom you feel would benefit from our podcast. And for more parenting resources, do visit our website at family.org.sg or follow us on Facebook at focusonthefamily.sg. Remember to keep tuning in to the ParentNet Podcast to learn and grow in your parenting journey.